Hey y'all, so today I'm going to be talking about my reading habits and how they've changed since joining BookTube. So 3 years ago, I made a video called Book Turn-Ons and Turn-Offs, where it was basically like the bookish buzzwords tag where you talk about things that you really like in books, but I also talked about things that I don't like in books or that are turn-offs for me. And this week I'm going to be making two videos that are kind of the updated sequels to that, where in this one I'm going to be talking about like how the books that I grab for have changed over the years, like how my habits have changed, like what I've realized I do and don't like. And then later this week I'm going to be posting a video that's basically just bookish buzzwords with like a little hint of things that I don't like in books. So like I said, today I'm going to be talking about how my general reading habits have changed. And while bookish buzzwords is like specific detailed things that I look for in books, this is more of like in general what I grab for and how that's changed from what I was doing 3 years ago, and just like how my opinions and thoughts on like what books I want to read have changed overall. That's a little bit vague, but let's just go ahead and jump into it. So I've been watching BookTube videos for 4 years at this point and making them for 3, and I feel like as a general overarching like thought, I've gotten a better handle on what I enjoy in books, and I am very much more aware of what I like in books. Like when I look back at the books that I read during that first year that I was watching BookTube, I think a lot of them at this point have like 3 out of 5 stars because I was grabbing for a lot of the books that were really highly recommended from people, but that weren't necessarily things that I was really intrigued by. But I think that this is a topic that pretty much every booktuber has talked about and has gone through and has kind of driven to the ground, so I'm not going to dwell on this for too long, but just overall, in general, I feel like I have a better handle on my tastes, and I'm going to talk about that both in this video and mostly in the bookish buzzwords video. But on a slightly more specific basis, I've kind of realized how to recognize books that I just know I won't like. And I honestly don't know how to put it into words, but sometimes even if a premise sounds interesting, like the way that book is described, or just like sometimes even the cover or the way something's marketed, I just can tell that it's something I'm not gonna like. Like I said, it's very hard for me to explain like more specifically what I mean by this because it's almost more of a general tone or vibe to the way that a book is described versus the actual words used to describe it. So like, I'm sorry that I can't be more specific there, but if I think of a more specific example, I will add it in here. So one of the major ways that my reading has changed over the last few years can be seen directly behind me, and that is that when I first started BookTube, I did not read any sort of visual novels. I did not read any manga, comics, or graphic novels at all. In fact, there's a video on my channel that I made back like in the first few months of doing BookTube that I've honestly seriously considered deleting several times because it was a Tuesday Talks topic, and I think that the topic was like, are like manga, comics, graphic novels actually books? And I think in that video I basically just said like, no, I consider them different. And I used a lot of like Goodreads challenge-based reasoning, like I feel like it's cheating to read a volume of a manga and say that I read a book when actually reading a 400-page book takes a lot longer. So like, I get that reasoning, like I get that it feels like cheating, and it still kind of does feel like cheating when I'm like, I read another book and it was like a 200-page manga that took me an hour to read. But like, I literally said that I didn't think of them as also books, which just is not okay. So when I started BookTube, I definitely kind of looked down on these book formats, and I didn't really consider that I would ever really enjoy reading them, and now I really do. But kind of as an addendum to that, I've kind of realized over the past 1 or 2 years that comics may not be for me. I'm not sure what it is, whether it's the length of the book, or maybe I just don't connect with visual novels as much as I do with like text-based novels, but I still struggle to give volumes of manga, comics, graphic novels like 5 out of 5 stars. Like even the ones that I really enjoy, the individual volumes get like 4 out of 5 and the series gets 5 out of 5 because the overarching story is better. So I don't know if maybe it's storylines being like stretched out longer because it's visual, or I really, really don't know. But for some reason, I still have found that while I really, really enjoy most of these formats, we'll get into the comics thing in a minute, like for some reason, I still can't quite love them as much as I do text-based novels. That said, I've realized that of these three formats, graphic novels, comics, manga, the one that I have found myself gravitating toward most is manga. Of the visual novels behind me, the ones that I have enjoyed the most have been the manga. I am reading the Battle Royale manga series and I love it. I freaking love Death Note so much, and the Orange manga series is another of my favorite series. So like clearly of these three different formats, manga stands head and shoulders above the rest, and I would probably pick up a manga long before I would pick up a comic or a graphic novel. To be fair, as far as just general graphic novels, the only ones that I've really read are the Scott Pilgrim ones, so like I could be biased because I thought those were just alright, but I have preferred manga. And like I said, the more that I read of comics, the more I think maybe comics just aren't my thing. Maybe it's the more episodic nature of a lot of the comics that I've read, but for some reason I just don't find myself enjoying them the same way that I enjoy manga. Maybe it's the comics that I've read, maybe I just need to find comics that I'm going to enjoy more, but I liked the Saga comic series, but just like alright. Like I dropped several of the volumes down from 4 stars to 3 stars because I just didn't love them as much as I thought I did. And I don't know, even when it's a series, which I love series, I'm finding myself not like gravitating toward or connecting with comics the same way I do with text-based novels and the same way I do with manga. I'm not sure what exactly it is about the format, but there's clearly some sort of distinct difference that makes me like them less. So to wrap up this general point about visual novels, I didn't read them at all when I started BookTube, and now I've read a lot of them and I've found that I really, really love manga. I plan to pick up a lot more manga in the future. Like manga was probably a pretty big chunk of my reading last year, or at least visual novels in general were. And I really enjoy it now. I'm not gonna delete that video from 3 years ago, but if you wanna watch it, I can. I felt like I was being really logical and making some good points, but honestly, I just feel like I was kind of bashing visual novels, so apologies. I feel so bad about it now. I don't hold that opinion anymore, but moving on. So the next way that my reading tastes have changed is that I've realized that certain types of fantasy are not my thing. And I think that when I started BookTube, I was kind of like, yeah, fantasy. I love fantasy books. Fantasy is my favorite genre. Because I love Harry Potter, and a lot of the other series that I have really loved historically have been fantasy series. But over the last year or so, I've realized that there are certain like subgenres of fantasy that I just am not interested in the slightest. I'm gonna get more detailed about this in my Bookish Buzzwords video because I feel like that's like the more appropriate place for that, so I'll leave that linked up in the cards when I post it. But basically, I've realized that certain subgenres of fantasy just don't click with me, and those, I looked up the terms because there are so many subgenres of fantasy. Epic fantasy, sword and sorcery, and historical fantasy were the ones that really jumped out to me as like what I'm talking about. Essentially, it's the difference between Mistborn, which is like my favorite thing on the entire planet, and The Way of Kings, which I enjoyed, but definitely wasn't quite as up there for me. And I'll explain this more, like I said, in the Bookish Buzzwords video. Also, apologies if those subgenres of fantasy have been misused and are misused in the Bookish Buzzwords video, because these subgenres are kind of vague, and I'm trying my best to explain why I do and don't like them and what aspects of them I do and don't like. So if I kind of misuse the term, let me know, because they're vague. Another way my reading habits have changed recently is that I've started listening to audiobooks more. I hadn't really listened to audiobooks at all until like the fall of 2016, And when that happened, I kind of enjoyed them, but it was definitely very hit or miss for me as far as how much I enjoyed the audiobooks I was listening to. But over the past few months, I've actually been listening to some more audiobooks and really enjoying the format. They're super convenient for me because I work in the basement of a library, so basically I get to just put in earbuds and do my job. So I can just work all day listening to an audiobook, and that's really nice. But until recently, I wasn't super in love with the format. There were definitely some audiobooks I'd really enjoyed, but none that I had like really loved and felt like made me love the format. I take that back. The audiobooks of the Diviner series are really fantastic, but those were like the only ones that I really loved. The rest of them were pretty hit or miss for me. Until recently, I really enjoyed the 1Q84 audiobook a lot. Another way that my reading tastes have changed pretty recently actually has to do with age ranges. So middle grade versus YA versus adult novels. And yes, obviously you can be any age and read any of these books. You can be a 12-year-old reading an adult novel or a 50-year-old reading a middle grade novel. I'm not judging here. These are just like the age distinctions and my current like opinions on them and what I tend to grab for. So for the past few years, I've started to realize that I don't really click with middle grade anymore. I'm not sure if this is a temporary thing, if I will enjoy it again, but it's been a long time since I've grabbed for a middle grade story that sounded interesting. Maybe it's the themes of middle grade stories that I don't really enjoy. I'm not going to say that they're like juvenile or anything, but I mean, they are written for middle grade, but I digress. I mean, quite obviously, I'm well outside of its like target age range, but maybe it's just like the themes of middle grade stories. I don't know, something about them is not intriguing me to pick them up. I think it also doesn't help that the last middle grade book I picked up was The Iron Trial by Cassandra Clare and Holly Black. I really love all of Cassandra Clare's books, but I didn't really enjoy that one. I was not impressed by it. It wasn't bad, it was just all right. There was nothing that I was like super compelled by, so I don't know. And recently I've actually found myself gravitating toward adult novels a lot more than YA novels. And obviously this isn't me being like, I'm abandoning YA is stupid, I've grown out of it. Like, I don't think that's gonna happen anytime in the near future. But I think that just lately, the stories that have been really intriguing me have just happened to be adult novels. I actually went back recently and I tried to see like the ratio of adult versus YA books that I read, and I think that I still have read more YA books over the past few years, but the number of adult books that I've read has actually been surprisingly high. And the adult books that I have read over the past few years have actually tended to get higher ratings and to be higher on my like favorites list of the year. In fact, all three of my favorite books from 2017 were adult novels. I think that in 2016, the top three were all adult novels. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I've seen that video, but like the top few have tended to be adult novels, and that wasn't something that I realized until recently when I started to grab toward more adult novels. Actually, now that I think about it, Battle Royale may count as a YA novel. I'm not sure on that. I mean, it centers around 14-year-olds, so I guess it technically is a young adult novel, but it's like so gory and graphic, so I don't know. Just lately I've started to realize that I have given adult novels typically pretty high ratings, and I've tended to gravitate more toward adult novels over the past few months to a year, and maybe this is just a temporary thing, but who knows. I've just started to realize that I have more of an appreciation for an adult novel than I originally thought I did. Another change in my reading habits that I've noticed is that I've tended to actually gravitate more toward translated works, largely Japanese. Obviously, a lot of that is manga, but also Murakami novels, which I've only read one at this point, but I recently went and bought like 3 of them because I want to read like everything he's ever written now. So like, I guess manga and Murakami are only like 2 things. Also, Koshin Takami Battle Royale. I guess just lately I have been interested in reading a lot of stories by Japanese authors, and I have just been more interested in reading translated works. I think that this is largely coincidental. I don't think I've been actively seeking out translated works. It just so happens that I started getting interested in manga, and I was really intrigued by 1Q84 by Murakami, and now I want to read the rest of his books, and I was really interested in Battle Royale. So maybe it's just like a coincidental thing, but it's intriguing nonetheless to me. And then my last point is kind of almost 2 points like mashed up together, but I think that lately, I don't know how long this has been going on, but lately I've actually tended to gravitate toward dark-toned, mysterious, intriguing novels over sci-fi and fantasy. And honestly, sci-fi has never been all the way up there with fantasy in terms of my favorite genres. Like, it's one that I've always enjoyed, but fantasy has always been definitively my favorite genre. But lately I've realized that the stories and the ideas that I've been gravitating toward more have been more along the lines of like intriguing, slow-paced, mysterious, dark novels, and often ones that take place in the real world versus like urban fantasy, high fantasy, stuff like that. I just haven't been gravitating toward that as much recently, even though it's still something I really enjoy. To be perfectly honest, I don't know if this is like a long-term change in my tastes or if it's just kind of like a mood thing. Lately I've been in the mood for these types of books, but it started probably over the summer, maybe before that, I don't know. But like when I read If We Were Villains by Emil Rio, I talk about this book all the time, I'm sorry. But that just really made me want to read like all these like dark academia, murder mystery novels. And maybe I've just been in the mood for that for quite a while, but how long does it take for a mood to become like my general reading tastes? Like obviously I still love fantasy and it's definitely one of my favorite genres. I just would say at this exact point in time, it may not be definitively my favorite genre just because it's not what I've been gravitating toward as of late. So yeah, in recent months and maybe even over the past like year or so, I've been generally gravitating toward dark books over anything else. For some reason, like darker storylines are what I've just been in the mood for, but largely like mysterious, intriguing, slower paced versus like fantasy. So it'll be interesting for me to see like if this continues or if I just go right back into my fantasy, because I do, like I said, I've said this like 3 times at this point, I love fantasy, but lately it's just not what I've been grabbing for. Also lately, setting and like atmosphere have been like big things that are really intriguing to me. Like right now, the #1 book that I've been like really wanting to pick up is A Discovery of Witches, which is kind of like a blend of the 2 things that I really love. Like it seems very dark and mysterious and it has this like Oxford setting, which is so atmospheric, but like it's also a fantasy novel. So I think that that one's gonna be like a really, really interesting one for me. I need to pick it up soon, so we'll see. Also, Daughter of Smoke and Bone is another one that I think walks that line. So like I'll get to both of those soon, but like those feel like kind of the merging of the 2 like favorite genres that I've got going on right now. And honestly, one of them isn't even really a genre, it's like kind of a mood. Who knows? I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. So that's my video on how my reading habits / tastes have changed over the year. Honestly, I think that in general, I just have kind of discovered what I like more. And lately I've realized that I've been giving out a lot of like 4-star ratings and I'm like, why am I giving out such high ratings? But I think it's just that I have kind of discovered what I like and what I don't like, and I'm not picking up books that I am like questioning or like that I don't know if I'll actually like it. So yeah, let me know down in the comments if there's some like major way that your reading tastes have changed over the years, because that kind of stuff is really interesting me lately. As always, I will leave links down in the description to my blog, Twitter, and Goodreads. Please add me as a friend on Goodreads. I would love to be friends with all of you. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!